close your eyes and imagine standing on the Acropolis in Athens as the sun sets over the Aegean Sea. The white marble of the Parthenon glows golden in the fading light, and a warm Mediterranean breeze carries the scent of olive groves and sea salt. Below, the ancient city spreads out in every direction, a place where democracy was born, where philosophy flourished, where mathematics and science took their first steps toward modern understanding. Tonight, we journey through the world of ancient Greece, a civilization that gave us theater, the Olympics, democracy, and ideas that still shape how we think about the world. This is the story of the Greeks, whose small city-states created a culture that influenced all of Western civilization. Fact: 1. Ancient Greek civilization lasted approximately 1,500 years, from the earliest Minoan culture, around 3000 BCE, to the Roman conquest completed in 146 BCE, though Greek culture continued to flourish under Roman rule and influenced the entire Roman Empire. The civilization we typically think of as classical Greece, the era of Socrates, Plato, and the Parthenon, was actually a relatively brief period from roughly 500 to 323 BCE. Yet, this golden age of just 177 years produced achievements in art, philosophy, science, politics, and literature that shaped Western civilization for the next 2,500 years. Ancient Greece was never a unified country, but a collection of independent city-states called polis, each with its own government, customs, and often its own calendar and currency, yet all sharing a common language, religion, and cultural identity. Fact 2. The ancient Greeks didn't call themselves Greek at all. They called themselves Hellenes, and their land was Hellas. The word Greek comes from the Latin Graecus, the name Romans used for them. The Hellenes believed they were all descended from a common ancestor, the mythical Hellen, son of Deucalion and Pyrrha, who survived the great flood sent by Zeus. This shared identity united the various city-states despite their frequent wars and fierce rivalries. From Sicily to the Black Sea, from modern France to Egypt, Greek colonies spread throughout the Mediterranean, and wherever Greeks settled, they brought their language, gods, and customs, creating a vast Hellenic world connected by culture, even when separated by geography. Fact 3. Athens and Sparta, the two most famous Greek city-states, were bitter rivals with completely opposite ways of life. Athens was a democracy focused on arts, philosophy, and trade, while Sparta was a military oligarchy where everything revolved around creating perfect warriors. Athenian boys studied poetry, music, mathematics, and philosophy. Spartan boys were taken from their families at age 7 to begin brutal military training that continued until age 30. Athens valued individual freedom and creativity. Sparta demanded absolute obedience and conformity. Athens built the magnificent Parthenon and hosted philosophical debates in the Agora. Sparta built no grand monuments, wrote no philosophy, and focused entirely on military excellence. Yet both claimed to represent the best of Greek civilization, and their rivalry culminated in the devastating Peloponnesian War that lasted 27 years and weakened both cities permanently. Fact 4. Democracy, one of Greece's most important gifts to the world, was invented in Athens around 508 BCE by a reformer named Cleisthenes. The word democracy comes from Greek words demos, meaning people, and kratos, meaning power or rule. Athenian democracy was direct rather than representative. Citizens gathered on a hill called the Pnyx to debate and vote on laws, war, and policy. However, this democracy was limited. Only adult male citizens born to Athenian parents could participate, excluding women, slaves, and foreigners. Of Athens's population of perhaps 300,000, only about 40,000 had voting rights. Still, this was revolutionary for its time. The idea that ordinary people could govern themselves, that leaders should be accountable to citizens, and that everyone deserved a voice in government was radical and unprecedented. Fact 5. The ancient Olympic Games began in 776 BCE in Olympia and continued for over 1,000 years until Roman Emperor Theodosius banned them in 393 CE as pagan rituals. The games were held every 4 years in honor of Zeus, and during the Olympics, all Greek city-states observed a sacred truce, ceasing all warfare so athletes could travel safely. Athletes competed naked, and only men could participate or even watch. Women had their own separate festival called the Heraia, honoring Hera. Winners received olive wreaths rather than medals, but the glory they won was enormous. Olympic victors became celebrities, had poems written about them, and sometimes received free meals for life in their home cities. The modern Olympics, revived in 1896, try to capture this ancient spirit of peaceful competition among nations. Fact 6. Ancient Greek philosophy changed how humans think about the world, establishing methods of logical reasoning and questioning that form the foundation of Western thought. Socrates, who lived from 469 to 399 BCE, never wrote anything down, but taught through questions, a method we still call the Socratic method. He wandered Athens asking people to define concepts like justice, courage, and knowledge, showing through questioning that most people couldn't clearly explain what they thought they understood. His student Plato founded the Academy in Athens, history's first university, which operated for over 900 years. Plato's student Aristotle tutored Alexander the Great and wrote about everything from biology to ethics to politics. These three philosophers, teacher, student, and student's student, created frameworks for thinking about reality, knowledge, and virtue that philosophers still debate today. Fact 7. Greek mythology, with its gods, heroes, and monsters, was not just entertainment, but a religion the Greeks genuinely believed and practiced. The 12 Olympian gods lived on Mount Olympus, the highest mountain in Greece, and intervened constantly in human affairs. Zeus ruled the sky and threw thunderbolts. Poseidon controlled the seas and caused earthquakes. Athena granted wisdom and protected cities. Apollo brought light, music, and prophecy. The Greeks built magnificent temples to honor their gods and made regular sacrifices, believing the gods required offerings of animals, wine, and incense. They consulted oracles, especially the famous oracle at Delphi, before making important decisions. Greek religion had no holy book, no organized church, and no concept of sin or salvation. Instead, it focused on honoring the gods through rituals, sacrifices, and festivals to maintain cosmic order and ensure divine favor. Act 8. The Parthenon, built between 447 and 432 BCE on the Acropolis in Athens, represents the peak of Greek architecture and engineering. This temple dedicated to Athena appears perfectly straight and symmetrical, but it's actually full of subtle curves. The columns bulge slightly in the middle to correct the optical illusion that makes straight columns look thinner in the center. The floor curves upward in the middle to prevent the illusion of sagging. Corner columns are slightly thicker and placed closer together. Nothing is actually straight or uniform, yet everything appears perfect to the human eye. The Parthenon was originally brightly painted in reds, blues, and golds, not the pristine white marble we see today. Inside stood a 40-foot-tall statue of Athena made of gold and ivory, one of the wonders of the ancient world, now lost to history. Fact 9. Greek theater gave the world drama as an art form. The Greeks invented both tragedy and comedy, performed at festivals honoring Dionysus, the god of wine and fertility. Theaters were built into hillsides, using natural acoustics so perfectly that someone speaking in the circular orchestra could be heard clearly in the highest seats 300 feet away. Actors wore masks with exaggerated features and built-in megaphones to project their voices. The chorus sang and danced, commenting on the action. Only men performed, playing both male and female roles. 3 great playwrights dominated tragedy. Aeschylus wrote about divine justice and fate. Sophocles explored human character and moral dilemmas, and Euripides questioned traditional values and portrayed women and slaves sympathetically. Their plays are still performed worldwide, dealing with timeless themes of love, honor, revenge, and the relationship between humans and gods. Fact 10. Alexander the Great conquered most of the known world before he died at age 32, creating an empire stretching from Greece to India. Born in 356 BCE as Prince of Macedon, Alexander was tutored by Aristotle before becoming king at age 20 after his father's assassination. In just 13 years, he never lost a battle, defeating the mighty Persian Empire, conquering Egypt, where he was proclaimed pharaoh and a living god, and pushing into India, where his exhausted army finally refused to go farther. Alexander spread Greek culture throughout his empire in a process called Hellenization, founding cities named Alexandria across 3 continents, the most famous in Egypt becoming the ancient world's greatest center of learning, when he died mysteriously in Babylon. Possibly from disease or poisoning, his empire fragmented among his generals, but Greek culture remained dominant throughout the Mediterranean and Middle East for centuries. Fact 11. The ancient Greeks made remarkable advances in mathematics that still bear their names. Pythagoras, who lived around 570 to 495 BCE, proved the famous theorem about right triangles that every student learns. Euclid wrote Elements around 300 BCE, a geometry textbook so comprehensive it was used for over 2,000 years and is still studied today. Archimedes, perhaps history's greatest mathematician, discovered P invented the screw pump still used in developing countries and calculated areas and volumes using methods that anticipated calculus by 2,000 years. When Roman soldiers came to kill him during the siege of Syracuse, he allegedly said, "Don't disturb my circles," referring to a geometry problem he was working on. The Romans killed him anyway, losing one of history's greatest minds. Fact 12. Greek medicine transformed healing from magic and superstition into a systematic science based on observation and reason. Hippocrates, who lived from 460 to 370 BCE, is called the father of medicine. He taught that diseases have natural causes rather than being punishments from gods, and that doctors should observe symptoms carefully, record case histories, and learn from experience. The Hippocratic Oath, which doctors still swear today, comes from his teachings. Greek physicians practiced surgery, set broken bones, prescribed herbal remedies, and understood that diet and exercise affected health. They didn't understand germ theory or have antibiotics, but their systematic approach to medicine, emphasis on ethics, and focus on natural rather than supernatural causes established principles that modern medicine still follows. Fact 13. The ancient Greeks loved wine, but almost never drank it pure. They mixed it with water, typically in ratios of 2 or 3 parts water to 1 part wine. Drinking wine unmixed was considered barbaric behavior, something only uncivilized foreigners did. Wine mixed with water was consumed at symposia, drinking parties where men reclined on couches, ate, drank, discussed philosophy, listened to music, and were entertained by dancers and flute girls. Women of respectable families didn't attend symposia, but hetairae, educated courtesans, were welcome and often participated in intellectual conversations. These gatherings were where much of Greek philosophy was developed, as men debated ideas late into the night. Plato's most famous dialogue, the Symposium, is set at one of these drinking parties, where guests discuss the nature of love. Fact 14. Sparta's entire society was organized around creating the perfect warriors. Spartan babies were inspected at birth, and those deemed weak or deformed were left on a mountainside to die. Boys left home at age 7 for the agoge, a brutal training program that continued for 23 years. They learned to endure pain, hunger, and hardship without complaint. They were deliberately underfed to encourage stealing food, but beaten severely if caught, not for stealing, but for being caught. At age 12, boys received a single red cloak and were expected to sleep outside year-round with no other covering. At age 20, they became full soldiers, but couldn't marry or live at home until age 30. This system created history's most feared warriors, but it also meant Sparta produced almost no art, literature, or philosophy. Sparta's legacy is purely military. Fact 15. Ancient Greek women had very limited rights compared to men, though their status varied significantly between city-states. In Athens, women couldn't vote, own property, or participate in public life. They were expected to stay home, manage the household, and raise children. Respectable women rarely appeared in public, and when they did, they covered their faces. In contrast, Spartan women had much more freedom. They could own property, participate in athletics, and were expected to be physically fit to bear strong children. While Spartan men lived in barracks, women ran the households and managed estates. Some Spartan women became quite wealthy and influential. The contrast between Athens and Sparta shows that ancient Greece was not a single culture, but many different societies with varying values. Fact at 16. The ancient Greeks established colonies throughout the Mediterranean and Black Sea, spreading their culture from Spain to the Crimea. Greek cities became overpopulated, resources scarce, and political conflicts intense. So cities sent out groups to establish new settlements. These colonies maintained close ties to their mother cities, sharing religion and culture while developing their own governments. Syracuse in Sicily became larger and wealthier than most cities in Greece itself. Massilia, modern Marseille in France, brought Greek culture to the Gauls. Byzantine, later Constantinople, and now Istanbul, guarded the strait between Europe and Asia. These colonies turned the Mediterranean into a Greek lake, spreading Hellenic culture, trade, and ideas across the ancient world. Fact 17. The Battle of Marathon in 490 BC. Became legendary in Greek history and gave the world the marathon race. When Persian King Darius invaded Greece with a massive army, the Athenians met them on the plain of Marathon. Though vastly outnumbered, the Greeks charged the Persian lines and won a stunning victory. According to legend, a messenger named Phidippides ran the 26 miles from Marathon to Athens to announce the victory, shouted, "We won!" and immediately dropped dead from exhaustion. This story, though probably exaggerated, inspired the marathon race in the modern Olympics. The victory at Marathon showed the Greeks that the supposedly invincible Persian Empire could be defeated, boosting Greek confidence and proving that their way of life was worth defending against foreign tyranny. Fact 18. 10 years after Marathon, the Persians returned with an even larger force, and Greece faced its greatest crisis. King Xerxes brought perhaps 200,000 soldiers to conquer Greece. At Thermopylae, a narrow mountain pass, 300 Spartans under King Leonidas held off the entire Persian army for 3 days, buying time for other Greek forces to prepare. The Spartans fought to the last man, fulfilling their code never to retreat. Meanwhile, Athens evacuated its population and lured the Persian fleet into the narrow waters of Salamis, where the smaller, more maneuverable Greek ships destroyed the Persian navy. These victories saved Greece from conquest and preserved Greek culture. If Persia had won, Western civilization as we know it might never have developed. Fact 19. The ancient Greeks valued physical fitness and beauty, seeing them as interconnected with mental and moral excellence. Young men exercised daily in the gymnasium, training naked. The word gymnasium comes from gymnos, meaning naked. They competed in wrestling, boxing, running, and the pentathlon. Physical education was considered essential to developing well-rounded citizens. Sculptures showed idealized human bodies with perfect proportions, representing the Greek concept of kolokagathia, beauty, and goodness combined. The Greeks believed a beautiful body indicated a beautiful soul. This emphasis on physical culture influenced Western attitudes towards sports, fitness, and the connection between physical and mental health. Fact 20. Greek pottery wasn't just utilitarian, but a major art form that provides invaluable historical evidence. Potters created amphorae for storing wine and oil, craters for mixing wine and water, kylixes for drinking, and dozens of other specialized shapes. These vessels were decorated with scenes from mythology, daily life, athletics, and warfare, painted in distinctive styles that evolved over centuries. Black figure pottery showed black silhouettes on red clay. Later, red figure pottery reversed this, showing red figures on black backgrounds, allowing more detailed work. These vases are like ancient comic strips, showing us how Greeks lived, what they wore, what gods looked like to them, and what stories mattered most. Thousands survive in museums worldwide, fragmentary windows into ancient Greek life. Act 21. The oracle at Delphi was the most important religious site in Greece, where people came from across the Mediterranean to consult the Pythia, Apollo's priestess. The Pythia sat on a tripod in the temple's inner sanctum, inhaling vapors from a chasm in the earth. Modern geological surveys suggest these vapors were likely ethylene gas, which produces a trance-like state. The priestess would utter prophecies, often cryptic and ambiguous, which priests interpreted and delivered to questioners. Kings consulted the oracle before wars. Colonists asked where to settle, and individuals sought guidance on personal matters. The oracle's predictions were famously ambiguous. When Croesus of Lydia asked if he should attack Persia, the oracle said a great empire would fall. Croesus attacked and was defeated. The empire that fell was his own. The oracle operated for over 1,000 years until Christianity suppressed pagan sites. Fact 22. Herodotus, called the father of history, revolutionized how we understand the past by investigating events systematically and recording them in writing. Before Herodotus, events were remembered through oral tradition, poetry, and mythology, with little distinction between fact and legend. Herodotus traveled throughout the known world, interviewing eyewitnesses, collecting documents, and visiting battlefields to write his histories, focusing on the Persian Wars. He tried to verify stories and noted when sources disagreed, though he also included fantastic tales he heard. His contemporary Thucydides went further, establishing critical historical methodology in his History of the Peloponnesian War. He examined evidence carefully, analyzed causes and effects, and tried to separate fact from propaganda. These two writers created history as a discipline, teaching us to investigate the past rather than simply accepting stories uncritically. Fact 23. Greek city-states used different forms of government, experimenting with systems that still influence political thought. Athens developed democracy. Sparta had an oligarchy ruled by 2 kings and a council of elders. Corinth was ruled by a tyrant, though in Greek, tyrannos didn't necessarily mean cruel. just someone who seized power rather than inheriting it. Some tyrants were quite popular and effective. Thebes tried various systems, including oligarchy and democracy. These experiments in governance, carefully observed and debated by Greek philosophers, provided examples and cautionary tales that influenced the American founders, French revolutionaries, and every democracy since. The Greeks proved that government could take different forms and that people could consciously design political systems rather than simply accepting traditional monarchy. Fact 24. The Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta lasted from 431 to 404 BCE and devastated Greece. Athens led the Delian League, a naval alliance of democratic city-states. Sparta led the Peloponnesian League of oligarchic land powers. The war dragged on for 27 years with devastating plagues, failed expeditions, betrayals, and massacres. Thucydides, who fought in the war and was exiled for losing a battle, wrote its history as a lesson about how fear, honor, and self-interest drive nations to conflict. Athens eventually surrendered, its walls torn down, its empire dissolved, and its democracy temporarily overthrown. Both Athens and Sparta were so weakened that neither ever regained their former power. The real winner was Macedon, which would soon conquer all of Greece. Fact 25. Greek scientists made discoveries that weren't matched for centuries. Eratosthenes calculated Earth's circumference around 240 BCE using the angles of shadows in two cities at noon on the summer solstice. His result was remarkably accurate. Within 2% of the actual value, Aristarchus proposed that Earth orbited the Sun 1,800 years before Copernicus. Democritus theorized that matter was made of tiny, indivisible particles called atoms. Hippocrates understood that the brain, not the heart, was the center of intelligence. These breakthroughs show that ancient Greeks didn't just philosophize abstractly, but made careful observations, conducted experiments, and used mathematics to understand the natural world. Many discoveries were lost during the Middle Ages and had to be rediscovered centuries later. Fact 21. The oracle at Delphi was the most important religious site in Greece, where people came from across the Mediterranean to consult the Pythia, Apollo's priestess. The Pythia sat on a tripod in the temple's inner sanctum, inhaling vapors from a chasm in the earth. Modern geological surveys suggest these vapors were likely ethylene gas, which produces a trance-like state. The priestess would utter prophecies, often cryptic and ambiguous, which priests interpreted and delivered to questioners. Kings consulted the oracle before wars, colonists asked where to settle, and individuals sought guidance on personal matters. The oracle's predictions were famously ambiguous. When Croesus of Lydia asked if he should attack Persia, the oracle said, "A great empire would fall." Croesus attacked and was defeated. The empire that fell was his own. The oracle operated for over 1,000 years until Christianity suppressed pagan sites. Fact 22. Herodotus, called the father of history, revolutionized how we understand the past by investigating events systematically and recording them in writing. Before Herodotus, events were remembered through oral tradition, poetry, and mythology, with little distinction between fact and legend. Herodotus traveled throughout the known world, interviewing eyewitnesses, collecting documents, and visiting battlefields to write his histories, focusing on the Persian Wars. He tried to verify stories and noted when sources disagreed, though he also included fantastic tales he heard. His contemporary Thucydides went further, establishing critical historical methodology in his history of the Peloponnesian War. He examined evidence carefully, analyzed causes and effects, and tried to separate fact from propaganda. These two writers created history as a discipline, teaching us to investigate the past rather than simply accepting stories uncritically. Fact 23. Greek city-states used different forms of government, experimenting with systems that still influence political thought. Athens developed democracy. Sparta had an oligarchy ruled by 2 kings and a council of elders. Corinth was ruled by a tyrant, though in Greek, tyrannos didn't necessarily mean cruel, just someone who seized power rather than inheriting it. Some tyrants were quite popular and effective. Thebes tried various systems, including oligarchy and democracy. These experiments in governance, carefully observed and debated by Greek philosophers, provided examples and cautionary tales that influenced the American founders, French revolutionaries, and every democracy since. The Greeks proved that government could take different forms and that people could consciously design political systems rather than simply accepting traditional monarchy. Fact 24. The Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta lasted from 431 to 404 BCE and devastated Greece. Athens led the Delian League, a naval alliance of democratic city-states. Sparta led the Peloponnesian League of oligarchic land powers. The war dragged on for 27 years with devastating plagues, failed expeditions, betrayals, and massacres. Thucydides, who fought in the war and was exiled for losing a battle, wrote its history as a lesson about how fear, honor, and self-interest drive nations to conflict. Athens eventually surrendered, its walls torn down, its empire dissolved, and its democracy temporarily overthrown. Both Athens and Sparta were so weakened that neither ever regained their former power. The real winner was Macedon, which would soon conquer all of Greece. Fact 25. Greek scientists made discoveries that weren't matched for centuries. Eratosthenes calculated Earth's circumference around 240 BC, using the angles of shadows in 2 cities at noon on the summer solstice. His result was remarkably accurate, within 2% of the actual value. Aristarchus proposed that Earth orbited the Sun 1,800 years before Copernicus. Democritus theorized that matter was made of tiny, indivisible particles called atoms. Hippocrates understood that the brain, not the heart, was the center of intelligence. These breakthroughs show that ancient Greeks didn't just philosophize abstractly, but made careful observations, conducted experiments, and used mathematics to understand the natural world. Many discoveries were lost during the Middle Ages and had to be rediscovered centuries later. Fact 26. The Library of Alexandria in Egypt, though technically outside Greece proper, was the greatest center of Hellenic learning. Founded around 300 BCCE by Ptolemy I, one of Alexander's generals who ruled Egypt, It aimed to collect all the world's knowledge. At its peak, it may have contained 500,000 scrolls. Scholars from across the Mediterranean came to study there. The library made copies of every book that arrived in Alexandria's port, sometimes keeping the originals and returning copies. Mathematicians, astronomers, physicians, and philosophers worked there, making discoveries and preserving ancient texts. The library's gradual destruction over several centuries, through fires, budget cuts, and religious conflicts, represents one of history's greatest cultural losses. We can only imagine what ancient knowledge was lost in those flames. Fact 27. Greek cuisine, though simpler than Roman extravagance, established the Mediterranean diet, still considered healthy today. Olives and olive oil were staples, as were bread, wine, cheese, and vegetables. Fish was more common than meat, as mountainous Greece had limited pasture land. Honey sweetened food, as sugar was unknown. The poor ate mostly grain porridge and bread with onions, olives, and cheese. The wealthy enjoyed fish, game birds, and occasional meat at sacrifices and festivals. Symposia featured elaborate dishes including stuffed fish, roasted game, and honey cakes. Greeks ate 2 meals daily, a light lunch and substantial dinner. The emphasis on olive oil, vegetables, fish, and moderation in all things reflects dietary principles nutritionists still recommend. Fact 28. The Greek alphabet, adapted from Phoenician script around 800 BCE, became the foundation for most Western alphabets, including Latin, which in turn gave us English. The Greeks made a crucial innovation. They added vowels. Phoenician script, like Hebrew and Arabic, used only consonants. Greek added letters for vowel sounds, making the alphabet much easier to use. The word alphabet comes from the first 2 Greek letters, alpha and beta. Greek letters are still used in mathematics, science, and fraternities. When we write mathematics using symbols like pi, sigma, or delta, we're using Greek letters. The Greek alphabet's clarity and efficiency helped spread literacy and made Greece a culture of writers and readers. Fact 29. Slavery was fundamental to the Greek economy and way of life, a dark reality often overlooked. Athens, at its peak, had perhaps 100,000 slaves, roughly 1/3 of the population. Slaves worked in homes, farms, mines, and workshops. Some were treated reasonably well and could eventually buy their freedom, but others, especially those in the silver mines at Laurium, endured horrific conditions and short lifespans. Slaves enabled wealthy citizens to have leisure time for philosophy, politics, and athletics. Even Socrates, who questioned everything, apparently never questioned slavery. The great achievements of Greek culture were built partly on slave labor, a reminder that even cultures we admire had serious moral failures. Fact 30. Mount Olympus, Greece's highest mountain at 9,570 feet, was believed to be home of the 12 Olympian gods. Ancient Greeks thought the gods lived in palaces on Olympus's summit, above the clouds where mortals couldn't see them. Zeus ruled from his throne, holding council with other gods, settling disputes and watching human affairs. The Greeks never tried to climb Olympus to check if the gods were really there. The mountain itself was sacred, and approaching it was dangerous both physically and spiritually. The first recorded climb wasn't until 1913. Today, thousands hike to the summit annually, finding no palaces or gods, just spectacular views and the ruins of ancient offerings left by pilgrims who never climbed higher but sent their prayers upward to where they believed the gods dwelt. Fact 31. Greek education for boys in Athens aimed to produce well-rounded citizens. From age 7, boys attended school to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. They memorized Homer's epics and learned to play the lyre. Physical education developed their bodies through wrestling, running, and gymnastics. At 18, young men entered military training for 2 years. Wealthier families might hire sophists, traveling teachers who taught rhetoric and philosophy, or send sons to philosophical schools. The goal was to create citizens who could speak persuasively, think critically, fight bravely, and appreciate beauty. This holistic approach to education, developing mind and body together, influenced Western educational ideals. The Greek word for education, paideia, meant much more than schooling. It meant molding character and creating excellent humans. Fact 32. The Acropolis, meaning high city, served as Athens's sacred center and fortified refuge. The flat-topped hill rising 500 feet above the city was crowned with temples, most famously the Parthenon. Ancient Athenians climbed the sacred way during the Panathenaic festival, bringing a new robe for Athena's statue. The Erectaion temple honored both Athena and Poseidon, supposedly built where they competed for Athens's patronage. Poseidon struck the rock with his trident, producing a saltwater spring. Athena produced an olive tree, and the gods judged her gift more useful, making her Athens's patron. The Acropolis was damaged by Persians, rebuilt by Pericles, converted to a Christian church, then a mosque, bombarded by Venetians, and looted by British Lord Elgin. Despite all this, it remains a powerful symbol of classical achievement. Fact 33. Dionysus, god of wine, theater, and ecstasy, had festivals featuring wine, sex, and frenzied dancing. The city Dionysia in Athens featured theatrical competitions and religious processions. Rural Dionysia involved phallic symbols, fertility rituals, and temporary reversal of social norms. Women, normally confined to homes, could participate in ecstatic worship called the Bacchic Mysteries, dancing wildly in mountains, supposedly tearing apart animals in divine frenzy. These festivals acknowledged that civilization required balance. Apollonian reason, order, and moderation needed Dionysian passion, emotion, and release. The Greeks recognized that humans aren't purely rational, and that societies need sanctioned outlets for irrational energies. This insight into human psychology was remarkably sophisticated. Fact 34. The Panathenaic Games, held every 4 years in Athens, rivaled the Olympics. Athletes competed in foot races, chariot racing, wrestling, and boxing. Unlike the Olympics, the Panathenaic Games awarded valuable prizes including amphorae, filled with olive oil from Athena's sacred groves. These distinctive black figure vases, many surviving in museums, were valuable prizes themselves. The festival also featured musical competitions, recitations of Homer, and a ship on wheels carrying a new robe for Athena's statue. A grand procession depicted on the Parthenon frieze brought all Athens together to honor their patron goddess. The games reinforced Athenian identity and showed that cities could rival Olympia in creating spectacular festivals. Fact 35. Greek architecture developed three distinctive column styles called orders. Doric columns were sturdy and simple, with plain capitals representing masculine strength. Ionic columns were slender with scroll-shaped capitals, representing feminine elegance. Corinthian columns, developed later, had ornate capitals decorated with acanthus leaves, representing luxurious sophistication. These orders became the vocabulary of Western architecture for 2,500 years. Government buildings, banks, museums, and monuments worldwide use Greek columns. The U.S. Supreme Court building, the British Museum, and countless other structures speak the architectural language developed by Greek builders. When we see columns supporting a pediment, we're looking at a design language that began in ancient Greece. Fact 36. The symposium was central to Greek elite male culture, a drinking party that was also intellectual salon. After dinner, men reclined on couches while slaves mixed wine and water in a crater. A symposiarch decided the wine-to-water ratio and set rules for the evening. Participants might play kotabos, a game where you flicked wine dregs at a target. They sang drinking songs, recited poetry, debated philosophy, and were entertained by musicians and dancers. Hetaerai, educated courtesans, might be invited to converse and perform. These gatherings were where much Greek philosophy developed. Plato's Symposium and Republic are set at drinking parties. The combination of alcohol, intelligent conversation, and social bonding created an atmosphere where ideas flowed freely. Fact 37. Pericles, Athens' greatest statesman, led the city during its golden age from 461 to 429 BCE. He expanded democracy, built the Parthenon, and made Athens the cultural center of Greece. He paid citizens to serve on juries and in office, allowing even poor citizens to participate in government. He strengthened Athens' navy and expanded its empire. His funeral oration for soldiers killed in the Peloponnesian War, recorded by Thucydides, eloquently defended democracy and Athenian values. He declared Athens the school of Hellas, a city whose culture and freedom were worth dying for. However, his policies also led to the Peloponnesian War, when Sparta feared growing Athenian power. Pericles himself died of plague in 429 BCE, but his vision of Athens as a beacon of culture and democracy influenced Western civilization. Bank 38. Greek religion had no organized church, holy book, or required beliefs. It was a collection of practices, rituals, and stories rather than doctrines. Different cities emphasized different gods. Athens honored Athena, Sparta worshipped Artemis and Apollo, Corinth favored Aphrodite. Families had household gods and ancestors they honored. Mystery religions, like the Eleusinian Mysteries, offered initiates secret knowledge about the afterlife. Greeks didn't worry about whether they believed correctly, but whether they performed rituals properly. Atheism meant not participating in civic religion, not doubting gods existed. When Athens executed Socrates for impiety, it was partly because he questioned traditional religious authority. Greek religion was woven into civic identity rather than personal faith in the modern sense. Fact 39. The concept of hubris, excessive pride that offends the gods, was central to Greek morality and tragedy. Heroes who became too proud, too successful, or too confident inevitably suffered divine punishment called nemesis. King Croesus, wealthy and powerful, was ruined. Icarus flew too close to the sun and fell. Oedipus, thinking he could escape fate, fulfilled the prophecy he tried to avoid. Greek tragedies repeatedly showed that humans should practice sophrosyne, moderation and self-control, accepting their mortal limitations. Those who forgot they were mortal, who tried to become like gods, would be humbled. This worldview emphasized humility and the acceptance of limits, providing a counterbalance to Greek ambition and competitive spirit. Fact 40. Greek warfare evolved significantly over the centuries. Early armies used individual champions like Achilles. Classical Greece developed the phalanx, a dense formation of heavily armored hoplites carrying long spears and large shields. Soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, shields overlapping, creating a wall of bronze. The phalanx was nearly unstoppable from the front, but vulnerable from sides and rear. So discipline was crucial. Battles were pushing matches, phalanx against phalanx, until one broke. Later, Alexander the Great's Macedonian phalanx used longer spears called sarissas, reaching 18 feet, and combined infantry with cavalry for devastating effect. These tactical innovations, combined with Greek metalworking that produced superior armor and weapons, made Greek soldiers feared throughout the ancient world. Fact 41. The helots of Sparta were a unique form of slavery. They weren't individually owned, but belonged to the Spartan state, working land assigned to Spartan citizens. Helots outnumbered Spartans perhaps 10-1, creating constant fear of revolt. Every year, Sparta's rulers formally declared war on the helots, making it legal to kill them. The Krypteia was a ritual where young Spartans hunted and killed helots as training and terror. Despite this oppression, some helots fought alongside Spartans in war and could eventually earn freedom. The system created Sparta's military society, but also its paranoia. Sparta couldn't expand or take risks because it always needed most soldiers home guarding against helot uprisings. Fear of its own enslaved population ultimately limited Sparta's power. Fact 42. Greek merchant ships carried trade goods throughout the Mediterranean, exchanging wine and olive oil for grain from Sicily and the Black Sea. Athens depended on imported grain. Since rocky Attica couldn't feed its population, merchant ships were wide and sturdy, unlike narrow warships, and sailed only during summer when seas were calmer. Pirates were constant dangers, as were storms that could sink ships and their cargoes. Merchants formed partnerships to share risks. Many votive offerings to Poseidon from grateful sailors suggest that sea travel remained dangerous, even for experienced crews. Maritime trade enriched Greek cities, spread their culture, and created a cosmopolitan merchant class that connected the Mediterranean world. Fact 43. The Greek concept of arete meant excellence and virtue, striving to achieve your full potential in all aspects of life. For a warrior, arete meant courage and skill in battle. For an athlete, it meant winning competitions. For a citizen, it meant serving the city well. For a craftsman, it meant creating beautiful work. Arete wasn't about being perfect, but about constant improvement, never settling for mediocrity. This competitive drive for excellence characterized Greek culture, motivating athletes, artists, warriors, and thinkers to push boundaries. The pursuit of arete made Greece a culture of achievement where people constantly tried to surpass predecessors and rivals, producing extraordinary advances in relatively short time. Fact 44. The Eleusinian Mysteries were secret religious rites honoring Demeter and Persephone, promising initiates better afterlives. These mysteries were celebrated for 2,000 years, and revealing their secrets was punishable by death. All we know is that initiates fasted, drank kykeon, a barley drink possibly containing hallucinogens, and experienced visions in the Telesterion temple. Initiates reported life-changing experiences and lost their fear of death. The mysteries were open to all Greeks, including women and slaves, unusual in a hierarchical society. Famous initiates included Plato, Aristotle, and Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Christianity eventually suppressed the mysteries, and their secrets died with the last initiates. We'll never know exactly what happened in that temple or what vision changed so many lives. Fact 45. Sappho, one of the ancient world's greatest poets, lived on Lesbos around 600 BCE. Plato called her the 10th Muse. Her poems, written in Aeolic Greek dialect, were passionate, personal, and often addressed to women she loved. Only fragments survive. Her complete works were lost when Christian authorities destroyed them as immoral. From fragments, we know she wrote about love, desire, beauty, and nature with intensity and skill that influenced Western poetry for centuries. The word lesbian derives from Lesbos because of Sappho's poetry. She proved that women could create great literature in a male-dominated culture. That only fragments remain makes her even more intriguing. Hints of genius mostly lost to time. Fact at 46. Greek hoplites, citizen soldiers who provided their own armor and weapons, formed the backbone of Greek armies. Only men wealthy enough to afford armor, about 30 to 40% of male citizens, could be hoplites. Armor included a bronze helmet, breastplate, greaves for shins, and a large round shield called an aspis. The shield was held in the left hand, protecting the holder's left side and the right side of the man next to him, creating mutual dependence. Weapons were a long spear and short sword. Full armor weighed 60 to 70 pounds. Hoplites fought in the heat, carrying this weight, pushing against enemy phalanxes. After battle, victors erected trophies and buried the dead, while defeated armies requested permission to collect their dead, a ritual that officially acknowledged victory. Fact 47. The concept of classical beauty that influenced Western art for centuries came from Greek sculpture. Sculptors like Phidias, Praxiteles, and Polykleitos created idealized human figures showing perfect proportions, balance, and grace. Polykleitos wrote a treatise called the Canon, establishing mathematical ratios for the perfect body. These sculptures influenced Renaissance artists 2,000 years later when Greek ideals were rediscovered. Michelangelo's David, though created in the 1500s, embodies Greek principles. What we consider beautiful, the proportions we admire, the poses we think look natural, are heavily influenced by Greek aesthetics. The Greeks didn't just create beautiful art, they established the standards by which beauty itself has been judged for millennia. Fact 48. The Greeks invented history, philosophy, science, and mathematics not because they were smarter than other peoples, but because they asked a revolutionary question. Why? Egyptians and Babylonians accumulated practical knowledge, but Greeks sought underlying principles. They wanted to know not just that the sun rose, but why. Not just how to cure diseases, but what caused them. This questioning spirit, combined with literacy, leisure time provided by slaves, and competitive culture that valued innovation, created an environment where new ideas flourished. Rational inquiry, the idea that we can understand the world through observation and reasoning, rather than simply accepting tradition or divine revelation, may be ancient Greece's most important legacy. Fact 49. The Hellenistic period from Alexander's death in 323 BCE to Roman conquest in 146 BCE spread Greek culture throughout the Mediterranean and Middle East. Greek became the international language of trade, diplomacy, and learning. Greek-style cities were founded from Afghanistan to Spain. Local cultures blended with Greek to create hybrid Hellenistic civilization. The Library of Alexandria flourished. Artists developed more emotional, realistic styles than classical restraint. Philosophy shifted from political concerns to personal ethics, with Stoicism and Epicureanism offering guidance for individual happiness. This cultural diffusion meant that when Rome conquered Greece militarily, Greece conquered Rome culturally. As the Roman poet Horace wrote, "Captive Greece captured her savage conqueror." Fact 50. The ancient Greeks loved competitive contests in all areas of life, not just athletics. Cities competed to build the most impressive temples. Playwrights competed for prizes at dramatic festivals. Orators competed in law courts and political assemblies. Even philosophers competed. Socrates reportedly won prizes for his intellectual contests. This agonistic competitive culture pushed individuals to excel and innovate, constantly trying to outdo rivals. The Greek word agon meant both contest and struggle, suggesting they saw life itself as competition. This drive to be the best, to win glory, to make your mark, produced extraordinary achievements, but also contributed to conflicts like the Peloponnesian War, where competing cities destroyed each other rather than accept second place. As you rest in this peaceful moment, imagine sitting in an ancient Greek theater, looking down at the circular orchestra where actors perform Sophocles' latest tragedy. The afternoon sun warms the stone seats beneath you, and thousands of citizens watch together. After the play, you'll walk through the agora, past the stoa where philosophers debate, past merchants selling wine and olive oil, past the temple where smoke rises from sacrifices. The world of ancient Greece is alive around you, vibrant and creative, full of questions and answers, of beauty and brutality, of profound wisdom and terrible wars. Let these images drift through your mind as you settle deeper into rest. Fact 51. Greek homes were modest even for wealthy families who invested in public buildings rather than private luxury. Houses centered on a courtyard open to the sky, with rooms around the perimeter. Men's quarters called the andron-hosted symposia. Women's quarters, called the gynaikonitis, was where wives and daughters spent most time. Homes had no windows facing the street for privacy and security. Furniture was simple: couches, chairs, tables, and chests. Greeks lived public lives in the agora and theaters, while homes were private retreats. This contrasts with Romans, who later built elaborate villas displaying wealth. The Greek focus on public spaces rather than private ostentation reflected democratic values and civic identity. Fact 52. The concept of tragedy originated in Athens at festivals of Dionysus. Greek tragedy wasn't just sad stories, but profound explorations of human suffering, fate, and the relationship between humans and gods. Tragedies featured noble protagonists with tragic flaws, hamartia that led to their downfall. Audiences experienced catharsis, emotional purification through pity and fear. Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, Euripides' Medea, and Aeschylus' Oresteia remain powerful today because they deal with universal human experiences: love, loss, revenge, justice, and the limits of human understanding. Greek tragedy invented many dramatic conventions still used today and proved that literature could explore the darkest aspects of human experience to create meaning and beauty from suffering. Fact 53. The Greek army's strength came partly from metallurgy. Greek bronze armor and weapons were superior to most contemporaries' equipment. The process of mining ore, smelting metal, and forging weapons employed thousands. The silver mines at Laurium, worked by slaves under horrific conditions, funded Athens' navy and provided silver for its coins. Mining technology included ventilation shafts, drainage systems, and ore washing facilities that were engineering marvels. The metal wealth from mines and skill of metalworkers gave Greeks military and economic advantages. The connection between natural resources, technology, and military power that Greece demonstrated remains relevant today. Fact 54. Homosexuality in ancient Greece was complex and different from modern categories. Pederasty, relationships between adult men and teenage boys was an accepted part of upper-class culture, especially in Athens and Sparta. The Erastes, older man, was supposed to educate and mentor the Eromenos, younger partner, in exchange for sexual access. These relationships were supposed to be temporary, ending when the youth reached adulthood. However, norms varied by city-state and changed over time. Women's same-sex relationships, like Sappho's, are less documented but clearly existed. Greek sexual norms differed fundamentally from modern Western categories. What mattered wasn't partner gender, but whether someone took active or passive roles, which connected to social status and power rather than identity. Fact 55. Greek coinage revolutionized economics and spread Greek culture. Coins featured cities' symbols: Athens' owl, Corinth's Pegasus, Syracuse's Arethusa. Coins were stamped with standard weights and purities, making trade easier than bartering or using unminted precious metal. Coins also spread propaganda, showing a city's patron deity and proclaiming its wealth and power. Electrum coins from Lydia influenced Greek coinage, which influenced Roman, which influenced modern currency. The portability, standardization, and trust enabled by coinage facilitated the commercial revolution that funded Greek achievements. When Alexander put his portrait on coins, declaring himself godlike, he established a tradition of using currency for political messaging that continues today. Fact 56. The ancient Greeks contributed fundamental words to science, medicine, and academia. Biology from bios, life, and logos, study. Psychology from psyche, soul, mind. Mathematics from matheme, knowledge. Democracy, philosophy, theater, athletics, politics, ethics, logic, and hundreds more English words derive from Greek. When scientists needed words for new concepts, they turned to Greek for precision and dignity. This linguistic legacy means Greek civilization echoes every time we use these words. The concepts and categories ancient Greeks developed for understanding the world became so fundamental that their language became the language of knowledge itself. Fact 57. Greek colonization created a vast Hellenic world connected by culture, language, and trade. Colonies from Syracuse to Byzantium maintained Greek identity while developing local variations. This diaspora spread Greek ideas, absorbed foreign influences, and created cosmopolitan culture. Colonists encountered Celts, Phoenicians, Egyptians, and Scythians, exchanging goods and ideas. Some colonies became wealthier and more powerful than cities in Greece. This expansion transformed Greece from a small, poor region into a cultural superpower whose influence extended across 3 continents. The process parallels how English language and culture spread through colonization and now dominate globally, showing how small populations can exert outsized cultural influence. Fact 58. Natural philosophy, the Greeks' term for what we call science, sought to explain natural phenomena through observation and reason rather than mythology. Thales proposed that water was the fundamental substance underlying all things. Anaximander suggested an infinite, undefined substance called apeiron. Heraclitus taught that everything constantly changes, famously saying, "You can't step in the same river twice." These early philosophers were wrong in specifics, but right in principle. Natural phenomena have natural explanations that human reason can discover. This rationalist approach, seeking natural causes and testing ideas against evidence, established the foundation for all subsequent science. Fact 59. The Delian League began as a defensive alliance led by Athens against Persia, but became an Athenian empire. Member cities contributed ships or money for mutual defense. Over time, Athens prevented members from leaving, moved the treasury from Delos to Athens, and used alliance funds to build the Parthenon and other monuments. What started as voluntary cooperation became compulsory tribute. When cities tried to leave, Athens crushed them brutally. This transformation from alliance to empire parallels how modern international organizations can evolve. The Delian League shows how even democracies can become imperial, and how defensive alliances can turn into tools of domination. Fact 60. Sophists were traveling teachers who taught rhetoric, the art of persuasive speaking, for fees. In democratic Athens, where success required persuading assemblies and juries, rhetorical skill was valuable. Sophists taught argument techniques, often claiming they could make the weaker argument appear stronger. Traditionalists, like Socrates, criticized sophists as charlatans who taught tricks rather than truth, who argued for pay rather than wisdom. However, sophists contributed importantly to education, teaching grammar, logic, and critical thinking. They questioned traditional values and religious beliefs, promoting cultural relativism. The tension between sophists' practical skills and Socrates' ethical philosophy reflects ongoing debates about education's purpose. Should we teach useful skills or moral wisdom? Fact 61. Pindar, perhaps Greece's greatest lyric poet, wrote elaborate odes celebrating Olympic victors. His poems, commissioned by winners or their cities, praised athletic achievement while exploring themes of glory, fate, and human excellence. Pindar's odes combined myth, moral instruction, and praise, elevating sports victory into something transcendent. His style was complex and elusive, packed with mythological references and profound observations about human life. Fragments of his work survive, showing the Greeks didn't just compete athletically, but created high art celebrating competition. The Olympics weren't just sports, but occasions for literature, sculpture, and architecture that honored human achievement and pleased the gods. Fact 62. Greek religion featured numerous local variations while maintaining common threads. Zeus was universally recognized as king of gods, but different cities emphasized different aspects. Festivals varied by location. Some gods were primarily worshipped in specific regions. Artemis in Sparta, Athena in Athens, Aphrodite in Corinth. This religious diversity within unity parallels Greece's political structure. Independent city-states sharing cultural identity. The Pan-Hellenic sanctuaries at Olympia, Delphi, and Delos brought Greeks together across political boundaries, reinforcing shared identity even during wars. Religion unified the Hellenic world while respecting local autonomy, creating flexible system that accommodated diversity within common framework. Fact 63. The Greek afterlife was generally bleak compared to Egyptian or Christian visions. Most souls went to Hades, a shadowy underworld where they existed as weak shades without joy or suffering. Only exceptional individuals reached the Elysian fields, a paradise reserved for heroes and those especially favored by gods. This afterlife belief encouraged people to seek glory in life since death offered little. Achilles, encountering Odysseus in the underworld, said he'd rather be the poorest servant alive than king of all the dead. This valorization of earthly life and achievement over afterlife rewards differs markedly from religions focusing on posthumous reward, encouraging Greeks to make their mark in their brief time alive. Fact 64. Greek geometric art from roughly 900 to 700 BCE featured abstract patterns and stylized figures rather than realism. Pottery was decorated with circles, zigzags, and meanders with simplified human and animal figures. This style developed during the Dark Ages after Mycenaean civilization collapsed. As Greece emerged from this period, the archaic style incorporated Egyptian and Near Eastern influences, becoming more naturalistic. Classical Greek art achieved idealized realism. Hellenistic art became emotional and dramatic. This artistic evolution from abstract to realistic to emotional parallels Greek culture's development, from nimble beginnings through classical balance to later complexity and individualism. Fact 65. The Greek language had numerous dialects: Attic Greek spoken in Athens, Ionic in Ionia, Doric in Sparta, Aeolic in Lesbos. These dialects were mutually intelligible but had different vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar. Poets wrote in specific dialects: Homer in Ionic, Sappho in Aeolic. Eventually, Attic Greek, the dialect of Athens and its literary giants, became dominant and evolved into Koine Greek, the common language of the Hellenistic world and the New Testament. Ancient Greek, preserved through continuous written tradition, can still be read by scholars today, allowing direct access to Greek thoughts across 2,500 years. Few languages offer such unbroken connection to the ancient world. Fact 66. Xerxes' invasion of Greece in 480 BCE is one of history's most famous conflicts. According to Herodotus, Xerxes brought over 1 million men, though modern historians think 200,000 to 300,000 more likely. The invasion succeeded initially, burning Athens, but the naval victory at Salamis and land victory at Plataea the next year drove Persia from Greece. These victories against overwhelming odds became foundational Greek myths about freedom defeating tyranny, citizen soldiers defeating professional armies, and Western civilization defending against Eastern despotism. Modern scholarship questions these nationalist narratives, but the Persian Wars undeniably shaped Greek identity and convinced Greeks their culture and political systems were worth dying to preserve. Fact 67. Greek festivals filled the calendar with religious and civic celebrations. The Dionysia featured theatrical competitions. The Panathenea honored Athena with processions, sacrifices, and games. The Thesmophoria was a women-only festival honoring Demeter. The Anthesteria celebrated spring and new wine. These festivals combined religion, entertainment, and social bonding. Everyone participated, creating shared experiences that reinforced community. Festivals gave structure to the year and occasions for cities to display wealth and piety. They also provided entertainment in a world without mass media, with theatrical performances, athletic competitions, processions, and feasts that broke up routine and gave people occasions for celebration. Fact 68. Athenian juries were huge by modern standards, typically 201 or 501 citizens, and sometimes thousands for important cases. Large juries reduced corruption since bribing hundreds of people was impractical. Jurors were chosen by lot from volunteers, received small payments for service, and voted by secret ballot. There were no judges or appeals. Juries decided guilt and penalties directly after hearing arguments from the accused and accuser, who spoke for themselves without lawyers. Eloquence was crucial for winning cases, which explains why rhetoric was so valued. This direct democracy in courts meant the people truly governed, though it also meant that demagogues could sway passionate juries to unjust decisions, as happened with Socrates. Fact 69. Theseus, legendary founder-king of Athens, supposedly unified Attica's small villages into Athens and established many Athenian institutions. His myth includes killing the Minotaur in Crete and abandoning Ariadne, who helped him, showing even heroes were flawed. The ship he supposedly sailed to Crete was preserved in Athens, and Athenians replaced planks as they rotted, creating the philosophical puzzle. If all parts are replaced, is it still the same ship? The ship of Theseus, a paradox, continues to puzzle philosophers about identity and continuity. Theseus exemplifies how Greeks used mythology to explain their institutions' origins and to explore philosophical questions through stories. Fact 70. Greek achievements in mathematics were remarkable. Euclid's Elements systematized geometry into logical proofs building from simple axioms. Pythagoras' theorem, the Pythagorean school's discoveries about musical harmonies and number relationships, and investigations into irrational numbers showed sophisticated mathematical thinking. Archimedes calculated pi, discovered principles of leverage and buoyancy, and developed methods approaching calculus. These weren't just abstract games, but practical tools for architecture, engineering, navigation, and astronomy. The Greeks proved mathematical relationships rather than just observing patterns, creating deductive mathematics that's still taught today. Euclid's Elements was the world's most used textbook for over 2,000 years. Fact 71. Ostracism was an Athenian practice where citizens voted to exile someone for 10 years without trial or accusation. Each year, the assembly asked if an ostracism should be held. If yes, citizens scratched a name on a pottery shard called an ostracon. The person receiving the most votes was exiled, though he kept his property and citizenship and could return after 10 years. Ostracism was supposed to prevent tyranny by removing overly powerful individuals, but it became a political weapon. Several prominent statesmen were ostracized. The practice shows Athenian democracy's dark side. Majority rule could punish individuals for becoming too successful or popular, not for crimes, but for threatening the community's egalitarian ethos. Fact 72. Greek city-states minted their own coins with distinctive designs. Athenian coins featured Athena's owl, symbols of wisdom, and the city's patron goddess. These coins were so widely accepted that owls became shorthand for money throughout the Greek world. Corinthian coins showed Pegasus, the winged horse. Syracusan coins featured beautiful portraits that influenced later coin design. The variety and artistry of Greek coins reflected civic pride and artistic excellence. These small pieces of metal were miniature artworks proclaiming each city's identity and wealth. Today, ancient Greek coins are prized by collectors, beautiful artifacts of a civilization that made even currency artistic. Fact 73. Education in Sparta was radically different from Athens. The Agoge focused exclusively on military training and obedience. Boys learned reading and music basics, but spent most time exercising, training with weapons, and enduring hardships. They were intentionally underfed, encouraged to steal food, then beaten if caught. The goal wasn't punishment for stealing, but for being caught, teaching cunning and stealth. At age 20, men joined the military but lived in barracks until 30, eating together and training constantly. This education created fierce warriors but stifled intellectual development. While Athens produced philosophers, playwrights, and scientists, Sparta produced only soldiers. The contrast shows how education shapes culture. Fact 74. Greek astronomy made significant advances. Anaxagoras correctly explained solar eclipses and realized the moon reflected sunlight. Aristarchus proposed a heliocentric model with Earth orbiting the sun, though most Greeks rejected this correct idea for the geocentric model. Hipparchus created star catalogs, discovered the precession of the equinoxes, and developed trigonometry. Ptolemy's later geocentric model, though incorrect, predicted planetary motions accurately and dominated astronomy for 1,400 years until Copernicus. These achievements show Greeks combined observation with mathematics to understand the cosmos, establishing astronomy as rigorous science rather than mere astrology. Fact 75. Greek ships evolved from imple vessels to sophisticated warships called triremes. These galleys had 3 rows of oars on each side, requiring 170 rowers working in perfect synchronization. Triremes were fast and maneuverable, designed to ram enemy ships with bronze-covered beaks. Naval battles were rowing races followed by smashing collisions. Athens became a naval power because it had the silver mines to build fleets and the port of Piraeus for naval operations. Naval service taught rowing skills to poor citizens who couldn't afford hoplite armor, giving them political power in democracy. The saying that those who man the ships command the state reflected this connection between naval power and democratic governance. Fact 76. The trial and execution of Socrates in 399 BCE became one of philosophy's defining moments. Socrates was charged with impiety and corrupting youth by questioning traditional beliefs and values. At age 70, he could have proposed exile or fines, but he had provocatively suggested Athens should reward him for making the city think more carefully. The jury of 501 citizens convicted him by a narrow margin. Rather than flee, Socrates drank hemlock while discussing immortality with his students. His death made him a martyr for free thought and showed democracy's potential to silence uncomfortable voices. Plato, Socrates' student, spent his career defending his teacher's memory and philosophy, ensuring Socrates became Western philosophy's foundational figure. Fact 77. Greek influence on Roman culture was profound. Educated Romans learned Greek, read Homer and Greek plays, studied Greek philosophy, and copied Greek sculpture and architecture. Greek physicians, teachers, and artists found employment in Rome. Greek gods were adopted with Latin names. Zeus became Jupiter. Athena became Minerva. This cultural conquest was so complete that the poet Horace wrote, "Captive Greece captured her savage conqueror and brought the arts to rustic Latium." Through Rome, Greek culture influenced all of Western Europe. The Renaissance rediscovered Greek ideals. Modern democracies look to Athens. We're still, in many ways, cultural descendants of ancient Greece. Fact 78. The Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, ruled by Greek pharaohs, descended from Alexander's general, blended Greek and Egyptian cultures. The Ptolemies built Alexandria as a Greek city with the library and museum research center, yet also built traditional Egyptian temples and presented themselves as pharaohs. Cleopatra VII, the famous last Ptolemaic ruler, was first of her dynasty to speak Egyptian after 300 years of Greek rule. This cultural fusion created Hellenistic civilization where Greek learning merged with Egyptian, Persian, and Jewish influences. The Septuagint, Greek translation of Hebrew scriptures, was created in Alexandria. This cosmopolitan blending enriched all participating cultures. Fact 79. Greek legacy in medicine extended beyond Hippocrates to comprehensive medical schools and hospitals. Alexandrian physicians dissected human cadavers, learning anatomy. Herophilus discovered nerves and distinguished sensory and motor nerves. Erasistratus studied the heart and blood vessels, approaching correct understanding of circulation. Greek physicians cataloged diseases, recorded case histories, and debated theories. They practiced surgery, set bones, and understood diet and exercise affected health. While limited by lack of germ theory and antibiotics, Greek medicine's empirical approach, careful observation, and ethical standards established foundations for medicine as science and profession. Fact 80. Greek pottery styles evolved beautifully over centuries. Geometric pottery featured abstract patterns. Black figure technique showed black silhouettes on red clay. Red figure reversed this, allowing more detail. White ground technique created delicate vases for funerary use. Each style required different skills. Potters and painters often signed their work, proud of their craft. Scenes depicted mythology, athletics, warfare, and daily. These vases, discarded as a trash by Greeks, are priceless museum artifacts today. providing detailed evidence of ancient life and demonstrating that Greeks made even utilitarian objects beautiful. The potter's wheel, kiln technology, and artistic excellence combined to create functional art. Fact 81. The concept of the polis, city-state, was central to Greek identity. Greeks defined themselves by their city. I am Athenian, I am Spartan, rather than I am Greek. The polis included the urban center and surrounding farmland, typically small enough that citizens knew each other. This scale made direct democracy possible in Athens and created intense loyalty. Betraying your polis was the ultimate crime. Exile was severe punishment because identity came from citizenship. Modern nationalism mirrors this ancient loyalty. The polis gave Greeks belonging, purpose, and identity, showing that humans are political animals, as Aristotle said, who naturally organize into communities and find meaning through civic participation. Fact 82. Greek influence on language extends beyond vocabulary to grammar and rhetoric. The rhetorical devices we learn, metaphor, hyperbole, irony, come from Greek analysis of persuasive speech. Grammatical terms, syntax, grammar itself, derive from Greek linguistic study. When we diagram sentences, we're using frameworks Greeks developed. Rhetoric, the art of persuasion, was systematically studied. Aristotle's rhetoric remains influential. The sophists taught argument techniques still used. This linguistic sophistication, analyzing language as an object of study rather than just using it, enabled precise thought and effective communication. The Greeks didn't just speak and write well, they understood how language works. Fact 83. The concept of logos had multiple meanings in Greek thought: word, reason, principle, ratio. Heraclitus used logos to describe the universal principle underlying reality. Stoics saw logos as divine reason pervading cosmos. The Gospel of John's opening, "In the beginning was the Logos," used this rich concept to describe Christ. This semantic density shows how Greek philosophical vocabulary expressed complex ideas. Modern philosophy still uses Greek terms because they capture concepts precisely. The language shaped Greek thinking, and Greek thinking shaped the language, creating a philosophical vocabulary used by thinkers for 2,500 years. Fact 84. Greek attitudes toward fate and free will were complex. Tragedies often showed characters trying to escape fated outcomes, but fulfilling them through their very attempts to avoid them. Oedipus's story exemplifies this. Yet Greeks also believed in human agency and responsibility. This tension between fate and freedom, divine will and human choice, reflects real human experience. We feel both free and constrained, responsible yet subject to forces beyond our control. Greek tragedy explored this paradox without resolving it, acknowledging life's fundamental ambiguity. Modern debates about determinism versus free will continue this Greek inquiry. Fact 85. The Greco-Persian Wars shaped Western historical memory as free Greeks defending against Eastern tyranny. This narrative influenced how Western civilization viewed itself: democratic, free, individualistic versus Oriental despotism. Edward Said called this Orientalism, using the other to define oneself. While Greeks did have more political freedom than Persians, the binary oversimplifies. Persia was sophisticated, tolerant, and cultured. Athens practiced slavery and excluded women from politics. The stark contrast between freedom and tyranny was partly Greek propaganda, but it became foundational to Western self-understanding. We still frame conflicts as freedom versus tyranny, democracy versus authoritarianism, echoing ancient Greek narratives. Fact 86. The gymnasium was central to Greek civic life, not just for athletics, but for socializing and learning. Young men exercised, bathed, and conversed with teachers and philosophers. Socrates frequented gymnasiums to engage youths in discussion. The combination of physical and intellectual development reflected the Greek ideal of kalokagathia, beautiful and good. This holistic approach, developing body and mind together, influenced educational philosophy for centuries. Modern liberal arts education, aiming to create well-rounded individuals, traces back to Greek paideia. The gymnasium shows Greeks didn't separate physical and mental excellence, but saw them as interconnected aspects of human flourishing. Fact 87. Greek mathematics included geometry, arithmetic, and mathematical philosophy. Pythagoreans believed numbers were reality's fundamental nature. They discovered mathematical relationships in music. Notes harmonizing had simple numerical ratios. They found geometric patterns in nature. Mathematics became a way to understand cosmos's underlying order. This Pythagorean idea that mathematics describes reality still drives physics. When modern scientists use equations to describe natural laws, they follow Greek intuition that mathematics reveals truth. The Greek discovery that abstract mathematical relationships correspond to physical reality was profound philosophical and scientific breakthrough. Fact 88. Greek drama's structure influenced all subsequent Western theater. The three-act structure, character development, climax and resolution, chorus commentary, recognition scenes, all originated in Greek theater. Shakespeare, Molière, and modern playwrights adapted Greek techniques. Plot devices like Deus ex machina, literally God from the machine, referring to gods lowered by crane to resolve plots, came from Greek staging. Theater vocabulary is Greek: drama, scene, prologue, episode, catastrophe. Theater architecture, with raised stage and tiered seating, descends from Greek designs. Theater as art form, as social commentary, as entertainment, all began in Athens at festivals of Dionysus. Fact 89. The mystery religions offered personal salvation and secret knowledge beyond civic religion. Orphic mysteries promised reincarnation and eventual release from the cycle. Eleusinian Mysteries revealed secrets about death and afterlife. These religions answered spiritual needs civic religion didn't address, offering hope for good afterlives and personal relationships with divine. They influenced early Christianity, which also offered salvation and personal connection with God. The coexistence of civic and mystery religions shows religious pluralism wasn't modern invention, but ancient reality. Greeks could participate in multiple religious communities, fulfilling different spiritual needs through different practices. Fact 90. Greek influence on gender norms and sexuality was complex and contradictory. Public sphere was masculine. Women ideally stayed home. Yet powerful female characters in myth and literature, Athena, Artemis, Medea, Antigone, showed women's potential. Sappho's poetry celebrated female experience and desire. The hetairai, though stigmatized, had freedoms respectable women lacked. Gender norms varied by city-state and time period. This complexity defies simple generalizations. Greek attitudes toward women and sexuality influenced Western culture profoundly, sometimes providing justification for misogyny, sometimes offering examples of female power and agency. Understanding this complexity prevents anachronistic judgments while acknowledging real limitations on women's lives. Fact 91. The Persian Wars' aftermath saw Athens' transformation into an imperial power through the Delian League. Athens used allied funds to build monuments and establish colonies, enriching itself while claiming to defend Greece. This imperial democracy combined democratic government at home with empire abroad. Pericles justified empire as deserved reward for defeating Persia. Critics saw hypocrisy in Athens championing freedom while dominating allies. This contradiction between democratic ideals and imperial practice recurs in history. Modern democracies grapple with similar tensions between professed values and imperial actions. Athens shows that democracy doesn't prevent imperialism, and that even governments of the people can oppress other peoples. Fact 92. Greek exploration expanded geographic knowledge. Pytheas traveled to Britain around 325 BCE, describing the midnight sun and the tides. Nearchus sailed from India to Persia for Alexander. Greek geographers mapped the known world, though with significant errors. They believed Earth was spherical based on observations like ships disappearing hull first over the horizon. Eratosthenes' calculation of Earth's circumference showed sophisticated understanding. This curiosity about the world, desire to explore and document, expanded Greek mental horizons even as city-states remained small. Geographic knowledge had practical value for trade and colonization, but also satisfied intellectual curiosity about the oikoumene, the inhabited world. Fact 93. The Greek concept of virtue, arete, differed from Christian virtue. For Greeks, arete meant excellence and effectiveness, excelling at your function. A good knife cuts well, a good horse runs fast, a good warrior fights bravely. For humans, arete meant fulfilling your nature through excellent action. This excellence-based virtue focused on achieving potential rather than obeying moral rules. Aristotle's ethics emphasized developing virtuous character through practice, becoming the kind of person who naturally acts excellently. This eudaimonic approach, focusing on flourishing and self-actualization, contrasts with deontological ethics based on duty and rules. Both approaches influence modern ethical thinking. Fact 94. Greek legacy in architecture extends globally. Columned facades suggest stability and tradition. Government buildings, universities, and banks use Greek architectural elements to convey authority and permanence. The U.S. Supreme Court, British Museum, countless churches and civic buildings speak Greek architectural language. These buildings connect modern institutions to classical ideals: democracy, justice, learning, beauty. Using Greek architecture isn't mere copying, but claiming cultural inheritance, asserting continuity with classical civilization. This architectural legacy means Greek aesthetics still shape our built environment, making ancient Greece visually present in modern cities. Fact 95. The Greeks made mythology complex and multifaceted rather than simple moral tales. Gods were powerful but flawed, capable of petty jealousy and vindictiveness. Heroes like Achilles and Odysseus were admirable, yet troubling. Myths had multiple versions with contradictory details. This complexity reflected reality's ambiguity rather than imposing false clarity. Greek mythology acknowledged that life is complicated, that good people do bad things, that outcomes aren't always just. This sophisticated approach to storytelling influenced all Western literature. The morally complex characters we value in novels and films descend from Greek recognition that humans are contradictory beings in an ambiguous universe. Fact 96. The Greek Enlightenment in 5th century Athens saw rationalism challenge traditional beliefs. Sophists questioned morality's objective basis. Atomists explained nature materialistically. Thucydides sought natural causes for historical events rather than divine intervention. Euripides' plays questioned God's justice. This skeptical, critical thinking parallels modern enlightenments. However, it provoked backlash. Socrates' execution partly resulted from conservative reaction against questioning traditional values. The tension between preserving tradition and pursuing truth through questioning remains unresolved. Greece shows that intellectual progress isn't inevitable, and that periods of enlightenment can end in reaction. Fact 97. Greek symposia were spaces where philosophy, politics, art, and ideas intermixed informally. The relaxed atmosphere, alcohol, and social bonding created conditions for creative thinking. Many of Plato's dialogues are set at symposia, showing their importance for philosophical discussion. This informal, intellectual culture contrasts with formal academies and lecture halls. It suggests that breakthrough thinking happens not just in official educational settings, but in social spaces where people connect across disciplines. The symposium model influenced salons, coffee houses, and other spaces where intellectuals gathered. The importance of informal intellectual community continues today. Fact 98. Greek colonization wasn't primarily military conquest, but settlement of uninhabited areas or trade agreements with natives. Colonists brought Greek language and culture, but also absorbed local elements, creating hybrid societies. The process enriched both colonies and mother cities through trade and exchange. Some colonies became more powerful than their founders. This relatively peaceful expansion differed from later European colonialism's violence and exploitation. While not without conflict, Greek colonization shows empire can spread through cultural attraction and mutual benefit rather than solely through force. The model suggests cultural influence and economic exchange can extend civilization without requiring military domination. And now we reach our final fact, Fact 99. Ancient Greece's greatest legacy may be the spirit of inquiry itself, the belief that humans can understand the world through observation, reason, and debate. The Greeks questioned everything. What is justice? What is the good life? How does nature work? What should we believe? They created democracy, allowing humans to govern themselves. They invented philosophy, systematically examining fundamental questions. They established science, seeking natural explanations for phenomena. They developed history, critically examining the past. They created theater, exploring human nature dramatically. They celebrated athletic excellence while also honoring intellectual achievement. They were proud yet capable of self-criticism, confident yet aware of human limitations. Ancient Greece wasn't perfect. It practiced slavery, excluded women, glorified war, and destroyed itself through internal conflicts. Yet its achievements in art, thought, politics, and science shaped Western civilization profoundly. Every time we debate in democratic assemblies, question assumptions, seek rational explanations, or celebrate human achievement, we are living Greece's legacy. The ancient Greeks showed that a small society could achieve extraordinary things, that human reason and creativity could produce lasting beauty and wisdom, and that free inquiry and open debate could advance understanding. They proved that humans are capable of greatness. As you drift toward sleep, imagine standing on the Acropolis as the sun sets over Athens, its golden light illuminating the Parthenon's marble columns. Below, the agora bustles, with citizens debating in the shadow of the painted stoa. The theater of Dionysus awaits tomorrow's premiere. The academy's groves shelter philosophers deep in discussion. The Piraeus harbor welcomes ships from across the Mediterranean. Ancient Athens lives around you, vibrant and questioning, beautiful and troubled, human and divine. Let this image fade gently as sleep approaches, knowing that the world these ancient people created still shapes how we think, govern, build, and dream. Rest now, traveler. Your journey through ancient Greece is complete. May your dreams be filled with marble temples and olive groves, with philosophers' questions and poets' songs, with the glory of the Parthenon and the wisdom of Socrates. Sleep peacefully, knowing that you've walked through the cradle of Western civilization and its light still shines across the centuries.